everybody, welcome to week 13. This week we're talking about travel writing and ethnography and the overlaps that these two disciplines share. We're doing this in order to think about our research process for our feature pieces. I do want to say I've been grading the proposals as they've been coming in, and I love what I'm seeing so far. You guys have some awesome ideas, and don't worry, we're all going to be able to see each other's work again when we do peer review later in the term. So I'm really excited to see what you guys do with your proposals. So great job so far. So this week we have two activities. One is due Friday, and then the other one is due next Wednesday. So this week, as I said, we're doing travel writing and ethnography, and I've gone ahead and put up the assignments. So the first is a discussion topic. This is going to take the place of our regularly scheduled class time. So what I want you to do today, or anytime before Friday, is you're going to read Seth Kahn's Putting Ethnographic Writing in Context. It is an article that is published by a writing studies scholar, but it's definitely interesting because it looks at the overlaps between ethnography and the study of travel writing. And as he claims in this article, the idea of ethnography, or the scientific description of the customs of individual people and culture, emerged out of two specific historical phenomena: missionary work and travel writing in the 17th and 18th centuries. So this is a really interesting chapter. I specifically want you to pay attention to the subhead historical context on page 185. So if we go there, as you can see here, he starts talking about the idea of, well, if ethnography isn't science, if it's not a clear-cut, if you can't say something definitive about a people or a place, then what is it? Why do we talk about it as research? And this is where he comes to the conclusion that most scholars in anthropology, which is where ethnography is housed, agree on the two predecessors of the discipline, which is, as he says here, missionary work and travel writing, beginning as early as the 17th and 18th centuries. So I want you to think about that, and then he talks about the way that the writing differed, who the audience was, and what this pre-ethnographic writing did to our modern thinking of travel writing. So it's kind of interesting. So I want you to read that first, and then I'm going to have you choose one of these two chapters from two different ethnographers. One is from a book called Sidewalk, and one is from a book called My Freshman Year. So the first one, The Book Vendor, is a chapter, pull it up here, that kind of analyzes one ethnographer's approach to researching people. And he's talking specifically about a man named Hakim Hassan, who's a book vendor in Greenwich Village in New York City. So I want you to think about how he describes this person and the kind of conclusions that he comes to about street vending in New York City. The other one is an excerpt from a book that I think is great called My Freshman Year, What a Professor Learned by Becoming a Student. And this professor spent a year living in the dorms and researching students. So there's a chapter, As Others See Us, starting on page 67, that, let's see if it's called. These are just kind of excerpts here, As Others See Us, and how she starts to observe and think about the people and the students that she's essentially observing. So I want you to read one of those and then write a response in which you examine the major similarities and differences between the travel writers we've read and the writing of the ethnographer. So I want you to think about what similarities they share, what are their major differences, how do they incorporate research, how does their writing style overlap or differ from what we've read, and how can thinking about this help us in our upcoming feature piece, because some people would argue that travel writers are by nature ethnographers, and some would say they are not. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. No right or wrong answer, but all you have to do is post your response. You don't have to reply to peers this time around. But if you would like to read what your peers say, they'll all be there publicly, so you can read them. But you'll receive full credit for the class if you post one post that reflects on the readings, the Putting Ethnographic Writing in Context in one of these two, and compares it to the other travel writers we've read this semester. And then the next thing is you're going to do your own research for your feature piece. So I know some of you have already mentioned a few of those angles that you'd like to research in your proposal, but if you haven't started yet, this is your chance. You have a whole week to do this. You must have 3 sources as minimum. They don't have to be peer-reviewed. They can be you're thinking like a journalist, like a travel writer. So any text is fodder for research. So the idea is that we often draw on our own experiences and then supplement that experience with other sources. So what 3 sources will you use? So as an example, I give you one here. Let's say I'm researching the Soviet Arcade Games Museum in Russia for my feature piece. This is actually a piece I did write. If you want to look it up, it's here on Atlas Obscura. It was a fun piece. I actually wrote this originally using myself more prominently in the piece, and just based on the type of website that Atlas Obscura is, they kind of downplay the personal experience and upplay the research. So the piece took a lot of different forms as I was working on it, but yeah, here you can see it. And if you take a look at it, you'll see that I drew on a number of important sources, some of which were an email interview I did with an expert. You don't have to do that. I did because I wanted that voice of credibility. The website for the museum that I found online, and very badly translated, but nonetheless, it gave me some insight into the history of it, and an article I found online about the renaissance of arcade games in popular culture. So this helped me understand my knowledge of the place after I visited it, which was important to my piece. So what I want you to do is put together a list of your outside research in MLA format and a brief paragraph of what you learned from reading it or perusing it and how you plan to use it in your piece. So when you're finished, you're going to upload your research notes in whatever form you took them in to the assignment folder. And if you are doing an interview, I know Raphael, I think you're interviewing your grandma, if I'm not mistaken, and Nolan, I think you're doing an interview as well. So if you do that, use these guidelines at the Purdue Owl to cite an interview. It's very simple. It's basically the name of the person, personal interview, and the date. Okay, so that's it, and then you'll submit that as an assignment to the assignment folder. That's it, guys. I will see you next week.